it's just important to start infusing humanity and love and respect back into the conversation, grace.
This episode is sponsored by Etched Communication, a full-service public relations and crisis management firm. Connect with Etched via their website at etchedcomm.com. That's ETCHEDCOMM.com. I know we're going to have such a wonderful conversation today on Our Voices Matter. I am thrilled to welcome Rania Mankarious to the show. And Rania, you have your own podcast.
We do.
It is called Styling Social Justice. And
Yes.
of course, Rania is also, her main job is as the CEO of Crime Stoppers Houston, which is a huge, huge job and opportunity.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah?
I don't look like the crime fighting type, but I mean, I love everything about what we're doing. And ever since I walked in the doors there in 2006, I've loved everything about it.
So you started there as an intern, right?
I did. So I'm originally born and raised in Boston, and really very happy there. Had a really unique background. My sister owned a fashion magazine. I was helping her run the fashion magazine. Learned so much about marketing and how you present products to the world. Was in law school at the time, but got married and to a Texan who wouldn't live anywhere else but Texas, literally. I mean, and he said it pretty much straight out. And so I found myself in Texas with this really unique background, a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, a law degree, running a business, doing some consulting, thinking, what am I going to do here? What am I going to do? And I wanted to help people, but I didn't know how, and Texas was very different. I went to a few law, interviews at law firms, and they said, "You're great, but you're still just a damn Yankee." And I was like,
"No way!"
Yes,
they really said that.
No,
to
they
you?
did, and it was actually funny because I said, "Just okay, but just so you know, people from Boston don't like the Yankees. We like the Red Sox." And I'll never forget because this guy looked at me like I was absolutely crazy, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, you just called me a Yankee, it was really, really hard. But it was great too, because I ended up calling a friend in New York and I said, I feel very much out of place and I don't know what to do. And she said, you're in Houston, look in the nonprofit sector. You're in the nonprofit, capital of the world. Yeah. And so I said, well, that's interesting. So I went back to the University of Houston Law Center, looked in their book, and Crime Stoppers, I thought, God, that's not a good name. What is that? I don't know what that is. Was looking for somebody with, marketing and legal experience. And I said, well, I ran a magazine and I'm a law student. I know I've done a lot. Actually, at the time, was working a lot with, copyright law. And so I said, well, I'll just go interview. And I walked in. Catherine Cabanis was the new executive director, just followed Kim Ogg, and she started talking about what they did, and I immediately fell in love with it. All my worlds were colliding, this love for sort of family, which is why I did my master's degree, my love for like law and politics and justice, which is kind of why I went to law school. She looked at me, she said, look, you're fantastic, but at the end of the day, I'm looking for an intern, $10 an hour. And I said, I'll take it. And I said, can I just go back to Boston when I need to? She said, yes, you can. And I started like the next week and have never, ever, I've just loved it ever since. Every minute of it.
That's amazing. So you went from intern then to executive director after a few years.
Yes.
And then CEO.
Yes.
So what's the difference between executive director and CEO? What was that transition?
Meaning, we can't give you any more money, take another position title. No, really none. And honestly, to be very honest, executive director is a more comfortable term in the nonprofit world. We're executive directors, but we were in the middle of a really difficult capital campaign. When I was hired, they said, we want you to be sort of the new life of Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers has been an anonymous tip line. We've treated it like an anonymous program. We've been catering to the anonymity of the tipster since the organization was created. But the anonymity of the tipster is only one thing that we do. We are very active in the schools. We're very active in the community. We should be letting people in. We should be talking to everybody everywhere we go, and you're the person that can help us do that. And so they said, but you also have to build the first ever Crime Stoppers headquarters anywhere in the world. And I was like, okay, we will figure out how to do this. And so it was hard because I found myself trying to meet with CEOs that were like, who are you? No,
You're an
no,
executive
thank
director?
you. Yeah, and Crime Stoppers of
So you
the
needed to
police
have the-
department?
yeah.
No, we already pay taxes. Goodbye.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, no, we're a nonprofit. No, please give me an opportunity to talk to you. So I think the board was, you know, trying to think, let us even put you on an equal playing field, so you can maybe get your foot in the door. So, and you know, the title to me, for somebody that takes intern, you know, after having a master's and a law degree, I don't care about titles at all, but I care about success, and that's the most important thing to me. So whatever it takes to get the job done, we want to do.
So, for people who don't know what Crime Stoppers is, although I can't imagine there are that many people who've never heard of it.
Yeah.
So here in Houston, of course, I used to say the number all the time on the air, 713-222-TIPS, for anyone who has, wants to give anonymous information about a crime. But as you were just saying, there is so much more to the Crime Stoppers brand, if you will, than just literal crime fighting. So what is it that people don't know about Crime Stoppers and what you do and the impact that you're having in the community that you really want them to understand?
Well, I think it's really important. When I became the executive director in 2013, Rice University, through their capstone project, they were studying our organization. So I kind of picked up the results of that and was really diving into it. And one of the teams had said, it's fascinating. We went all over Houston. And we said, are you from Houston? Are you visiting? Did you just move here? Next question, have you ever heard of Crime Stoppers? They said 100%, almost 100% said, yeah, that's on the news. I mean, I heard about it on the news. They followed up with the next question, do you know what they do? And only 2%, and that's asking native Houstonians as well.
Wow.
Only 2% knew what we did beyond that tip line. So we knew there was an opportunity for growth there. I mean, our mission is to solve and prevent crime in partnership with citizens, media, and law enforcement. For the longest time, the notion of solving and preventing was, if we found John Smith who killed somebody, we put him behind bars, we've solved a crime, we've prevented a crime, because John Smith can't reoffend. But our team sort of saw a difference in prevention. There's so much there with education. There's so much we could do about, talking to kids about being safe at school, about what to do online, about teen dating violence. Now kids are dealing with drugs, they're dealing with synthetic drugs, they're dealing with online gaming challenges, they're dealing with harassment online, stalking, impersonation, online bullying. We have moms or families that are dealing with domestic violence, with animal cruelty, with home invasions, with identity theft. There's so much elder abuse, human trafficking. I mean, in a city as large and diverse as Houston, there is so much that we can study as a community to, one, make our city better, make our city safer, but also proactively protect ourselves and our kids. So our Safe School program, we've been working on it since 1997, really rebuilt it in 2013. In 2018, it became the first ever Crime Stoppers brand, Crime Stoppers of Houston Safe School Institute. We're in over 200 schools. We've reached over 1.2 million children. We've talked to them about everything from crime prevention to tips to tricks to strategies. We've removed 300 weapons in Houston from our kids' schools before the magic word, before they could ever be used against another student. Governor Abbott recognized us after Santa Fe and asked us to expand this program across the state and train all other Crime Stoppers across the state. We're very active in the community. We're very active with victim services. There's so much that this nonprofit gem, and I say the word nonprofit as often as I can because people still think, wow, I didn't know HPD does all that, and we're not a part of the police department. Now our first group that we serve is the police department. We're getting information to give to our law enforcement partners. We are serving our law enforcement partners every day. Our HPD has been our host agency for 40 years, but we also serve the community, and as a nonprofit, all the funding, the way we operate, our bylaws are all under nonprofit guidelines. So.
Okay, I want to really hit on this school safety issue because I know it's a big initiative for what you do, and you're having tremendous success. I'm stuck on the fact that you have removed 300 guns.
Weapons, so knives, guns.
Weapons from our schools, Houston schools. How did that happen? I mean, was this a result of students talking and telling what they've seen and heard, or how do you go about doing that?
So this has been my big thing with school safety. I have noticed that so many people have the conversations up here. Let's talk about bulletproof backpacks. Let's talk about the physical structure of the building, putting an alarm system at the front door. All of these things are important conversations, by the way. But people are overlooking the kids. And the kids are the first line of intelligence. They're the ones that know everything that's going to happen before it happens. They know who's bringing the gun, who's bringing the knife, who's selling the drugs, who's selling the prescription medication. They know gang activity. They know who's feeling bullied, maybe isolated, maybe suicidal. They know who's posting weird comments online. They know everything. So back in 1997, certainly I wasn't involved at the time, but the board had the foresight to make sure the tip line was in the schools. And at the time it was just go into the schools, maybe talk to the entire high school at once, say in a rally, hey, Crime Stoppers is here. If you know something's gonna happen, call us anonymously. We'll work anonymously, you'll get a cash reward. We'll never ever know who you are. We never ever know who the tipsters are from the moment they call to the moment they get their cash reward. So the kids found safety in that. They knew that there was someone they can call. And eventually they called, and they called again, and other schools called, and they called more. And now, after 2013, after the shooting at in Sandy Hook, when you had 20 first-year-olds that lost their lives, we realized the program needed to expand. And in addition to offering the tip line in the middle schools and high schools, we go in from kindergarten to 12th grade. We talk to these kids about everything they need to know about being safe in an age-appropriate manner. So with kindergartens, we're not talking about a tip line, but we might be talking about being a good neighbor, being a good citizen, respecting a police officer, respecting your teacher, maybe noticing if your friends seem sad or lonely, how to respond if your friends seem sad or lonely, and then the conversation obviously develops in 12th grade. We're talking about human trafficking and drugs and cyber safety and cyber stalking and gang violence and teen dating violence and really difficult things.
So is this only happening in the Houston community, or is this happening nationwide? Because this needs to be in every school.
And you know, Linda, this has been the biggest issue, is that, we don't have lobbyists walking down the streets and, the corridors of Austin. And the way Crime Stoppers work, we're all independent nonprofits. There's no hub. There's no
overarching umbrella organization.
No. There are rules to become a Crime Stopper. There are protocols to report your tips and report your solved cases, but that's it. And people get probationary fees all the same way, whether, regardless of where you're operating. But in terms of the prevention programming, we kind of went out on our own. And we did the research, and we poured in resources. And Houston's such an incredible city. We are the city to do this. But we were still stuck in the Houston bubble.
Right.
When Santa Fe happened, and it was like right there, it just broke us. Why are we restricted to the Houston bubble? We should have been everywhere. So we talked to the governor's office, and they agreed. And they said the governor wants you to actually train all Crime Stoppers across the state. David's Law had passed. There was a requirement for anonymous reporting platforms anyway in the school.
Explain what David's Law is,
So
please.
David's Law passed at the 85th legislative session, and of course it was due to a young boy, David, who was 16, who committed suicide after being relentlessly bullied. And his mom has shared recently, she was just visiting with Crime Stoppers and spoke at a luncheon, that kids were bullying him, harassing him, stalking him. Other kids knew. Nobody was reporting. Nobody was saying anything. And part of what she wanted to ensure was, one, that there was bullying education, which of course we do, but that there was a way for kids to report, and report anonymously, that there would be no fear of retaliation, that they could say what they knew and even just move on. But she wanted to make sure kids could report. So that's now a requirement in the state of Texas. And Crime Stoppers is an anonymous platform. It's protected by state statute, and our tipsters are always anonymous. So the fact that we're already in the schools, the fact that we have such a robust program, the governor quickly identified this as a tool. We've been training almost 40% of the state at this point. Other Crime Stoppers organizations, we'll be launching a webinar series this fall, thanks to Spindletop Charities. We'll now be replicating the model, hopefully nationwide.
Excellent, because that was going to be my next question is what needs to happen in order to get this in every school. It's so interesting that I'm so glad you made the point about kids being the first line of, what was the word you used?
Intelligence.
Intelligence, not defense.
Yes.
The first line of intelligence. I did videotaped a panel discussion last week at Rice University. We were talking before we even got started, and it's about countering violent extremism. And one of the panelists made a point of explaining to the audience her perspective about how we as a society do not validate and listen to our young people the way that we should, that we underestimate their intelligence, their passion, their intellect, their drive, and that they want to be a part of the conversations at a certain age, of course, that's appropriate. But when they're in high school and we're having these kinds of conversations, there is so much that they can contribute that we are not allowing them to, and that's to our detriment. That's on us. So for you to say that, I think, is so important for people to hear.
And that's what we've been doing, and that's why the program's been so successful. We were in the schools in the late 90s, well before this was a national hot topic. We were investing in the kids. Mm-hmm. What do you think? What do you see is happening? What are some of the signs that we're missing, that you're picking up on? And here's a way for you to call anonymously. And it's just always worked. And after these school shootings, and of course they're horrific, whether you're a parent or not, they are horrific. I see sort of like national people, does anyone in this country have an answer? And I'm screaming as loud as I can that, we have an answer in Houston. The Houston community invested in an answer in 1997. 20-something years later, this answer has removed 300 weapons from schools, reached 1.2 million kids, solved 2,000 school cases, and is only growing. And we want to share it because it is imperative that all kids and all schools feel safe at all times. That's just, to me, a non-negotiable when you talk about a thriving city, a thriving state, a thriving country.
There's so much that I'm sure comes across your desk, and some of the incredible people that you get to meet. Having been with Crime Stoppers since 2013, so 6 years now, I'm wondering if you've noticed any change in how people are relating to each other. I'm trying to get to the empathy part of our conversation now that we were having before we started, but it's always at the crux of every conversation we have on this podcast about human connection and being able to empathize with one another and not otherize each other.
Yes.
Have you noticed any? What have you noticed?
Well, I think that's a really important conversation because in the beginning, we would notice that Houston, and I think any place, operates as sort of segregated pockets. This is my community. I paid a lot to live here. My home is safe. I pay higher taxes than maybe those people. The mall's nicer where I am. The private schools are right there. Maybe this area has a better public school. My husband works here. I work there. I'm fine. Oh, I feel bad about what's happening to those people over there. Mm-hmm. It's not really my world. We've worked really hard to say, wait a minute. First of all, we have to care about those people over there. Second of all, we have to realize that we're in a transient city. Anywhere you live, we're going to mix and mingle, and those people over there, and I say it in quotes because I can't stand that sort of notion, but they're going to end up at your beautiful mall. They're going to end up in your neighborhood. We've got to care about each other. And third, you are not in a separate neighborhood. You are not in a bubble. You think you are not. And we really worked hard on those conversations. Now, because we focused on sort of the empathy and the caring and the really making people rethink how they're defining themselves and moving other people away. You're a different group. What happens to you doesn't happen to me, therefore doesn't matter really to me. We've worked so hard to break that. Human trafficking is a good one. To kind of put this into perspective, when we started to bring this up years and years and years ago, people say, I feel so bad. Literally, this is what I'd hear. when I'm doing my nails, I feel so bad, and I always wonder, is this a trafficking victim? Or if I'm at a restaurant, and I always try to make eye contact with the busboy to think, is he here okay? And I think of the CPS kids, and I think, God, I hate the fact that they have to do that, but what can we do? That's just the fate that they were born into. And it's sort of like you listen to this and your blood is slowly boiling, but you're thinking, how do we break this down and make you realize that this issue affects you directly, should matter to you directly, could be your daughter tomorrow, could be your son tomorrow. So we started to break the conversations down, the myths, the misunderstandings, the false realities, the falsehoods, and make people realize that one, crime, whatever the topic, we focus on crime, can affect you tomorrow, no matter where you are, no matter what fake walls you think you've built. But two, regardless, you should care about what's happening to your neighbor, what's happening to the other people, what's happening to this person or that person, and you've got to start understanding the realities of what's happening. We're so quick to put things in other buckets so we can separate ourselves. And we mislabel, we misunderstand, we recreate narratives, and all of that is wrong. So we sometimes get into the terrible narratives, we get into the ugly stereotypes, we get into the that's them, we don't care, so we can break it up and say that you are not looking at it right, that's wrong, and actually it can be you tomorrow. I think those have broken down walls, and you see now groups like the Houston 20 really activating in topics like human trafficking. The Houston 20 really activating and talking about human trafficking. Women that maybe 5 years ago would say, that's not my problem, it's not my world, now saying, we'll go in, it could be us tomorrow, it could be you tomorrow, it doesn't matter who it is, we all have to be in on this together. Those are important conversations, and I've definitely seen a shift.
So people are listening and trying to have those conversations now?
I think so.
You think so?
With empathy.
With empathy.
And empathy, because unfortunately they realized that it could be them tomorrow, could be them today, but also regardless, we have to care about each other.
That gives me hope to hear you say that. It really does, because it's at the root, of course, of so many of the divisions that we're having. We find it difficult to empathize with someone that we consider to be the other.
Yes.
And we don't really know or understand who that person is, what their circumstance is, etc. And many times we don't take the time to know. And what you're saying is that by breaking this down and helping people to see and understand that they don't live in a bubble.
Yes.
And that you really should care about everyone.
Yes. It's so important, and especially, in this world where we're all able to spit out our thoughts online and kind of walk away, and you have the protection of your phone or the computer, things you would never say face to face. For some reason you feel very confident to say it online, things that are hurtful, divisive, mean, targeted, things that I would call bullying, and I would advise children not to do. Adults are doing it every 5 seconds in record numbers on platforms like Twitter and other things. It's just important to start infusing humanity and love and respect back into the conversation. Grace. I always talk about it, even at Crime Stoppers. Can we just do everything with grace? It may not be an easy conversation.
That's such a great word, I know.
But do it in grace.
Do it in grace.
Do it in grace. Whether you're dealing with a victim, whether you're dealing with a difficult coworker, whether you're dealing with a difficult donor, a really complex problem in a school, a horrible victim family, law enforcement, whatever it is, can't we just operate in grace and kindness? To me, I remember being a little kid, sort of people would talk about superheroes, superpowers, and I'd say, I just want kindness. I want the gift of kindness, because it's a powerful thing to me. If we can be kind to each other and really help each other care and bring out the best and support, and it doesn't matter if it's happening to me or you, I'm with you, I want to help you, I want to lift you up. I mean, can you imagine what Houston or any city for that matter?
Any city would be like. I know.
And I don't think it's possible. I think it's possible.
Oh, I agree. We couldn't go on if we didn't think it were possible, because it is possible. So I want to talk a little bit more about your backstory and your background. You mentioned that you grew up in Boston, and your parents are from Egypt.
Yes.
Yes. So tell me about that part of your heritage and whether how that has played into who you are today as a human being with so much passion and empathy for others.
Well, our deputy director's in the room, and she'll tell you the first thing is, I don't like to be with anyone without sharing a meal. And I think that comes from being, Arabic and Egyptian. But, I remember growing up, born and raised in Boston. At a very young age, I was sitting on our family room floor, and Barbara Walters was interviewing President Anwar Sadat, who was the president of Egypt at the time, or maybe had recently been exiled. But we knew his daughter very well. She was a professor at a local university in the Boston area, and we were very close to her. But I remembered watching my parents watch the TV, and I kept looking back at my parents and kind of looking at Barbara Walters and looking at presidents and looking back and thinking, the power of this moment and of what Barbara Walters, people like you, have done your whole life was like, in that moment, like something was birthed in me. Like I was like, I want to contribute in this way. I loved the power of it to connect people. But my parents very, very wisely were raising us sort of in a Christian Egyptian bubble, which is a very small bubble, like in an Orthodox church or an Arabic evangelical church. I mean, you're talking about super small communities, saying you've got to integrate into the community, but you also have to know you're different. If you're never going to be a Barbara Walters, not because you don't have the ability, but because in Boston everybody's blonde and blue-eyed. You look at the TV networks, the news, that people like you don't have those jobs. We think you could be great, but people like you don't have those jobs. So you want to help people. You like bridging gaps. You like, you've seen sort of what, for example, my parents, if they'd stayed in Egypt, having one daughter at the time, planning to have another child in the future, they knew very well the future wouldn't be maybe everything they had hoped for their family. They knew they had to leave everything and come to the States. They raised us saying, look, you live here, you have opportunities you would not have had if we stayed in Cairo. You're girls, you can do anything in this country, you just have to work hard, but you also have to be realistic. And so I was always raised between this desire to I loved women like you and media and the power of it and the positive conversation and the connectivity and the way to move the needle, but also realizing I'm an Egyptian girl growing up in Boston, what am I gonna do? But I figured out a way to mix all the passion together and said, I'm gonna outsmart the system. I'm gonna beat the system. And so I said, I'm gonna go get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And my parents said, why would you do that? You're not gonna be a therapist. Like, why would you do that? And I was like, well, I might be a therapist. And they were like, no, we don't understand that. And of course, in the Middle East, people don't air their dirty laundry, let alone sit and go to therapy. So they were like, I don't understand what you're doing. And I was like, but I think there's value there in being able to talk to people about where they come from and looking at everybody, not defining them, but knowing you come from something, whether it's religion or broken family or perfect family or abusive family, whatever. It had value to me. And then I said, I'm going to go to law school, because I noticed at that time, people moving the needle, having these big conversations, usually had a law degree. Always. Whether they used it or not, they had a law degree. So I said, I'm going to get a law degree. And of course I did all that, and then my sister ended up having this big company, and I started working with her, and we had really compelling conversations. She was in New York during 9/11. You just started to see the world in a different place, and I always sort of had that backpack on that my parents sort of raised us with, that you're here, we gave up everything, but you're in the best country in the world. You can do anything if you put your mind to it. Be realistic, but work really, really hard. And I kind of just kept putting that in my head, but moving forward. And of course, eventually ended up in Houston, thanks to a husband that would never, ever, ever, ever live anywhere but Texas. But I'm so thankful I did, because I think that mentality of you can do anything, be realistic, but you can do anything, was met in a city where everybody thinks that way. You can do anything in Houston. I don't know that I could do this job in Boston. I don't know, maybe. I left there when I was 28, I don't know. But in Houston, I know for a fact you can literally do anything. So from Cairo to Boston, I think it all was kind of leading me to where I needed to be here.
I love that story on so many different levels. And it's so interesting. Clearly you are made for this medium. So, well, I'm telling you, you are.
I'll take it from you.
I'm telling you, you are. And it breaks my heart to hear that you had a vision and a dream of what you wanted to do and perhaps be a broadcast journalist, but because there were no women who looked like you on the air, that you didn't even consider that as a realistic goal.
No.
Which is it's a travesty. And now there are women who look like you on the air.
Absolutely.
And so it's interesting, born at a different time or whatever, your trajectory might have gone a different way, but now you're using your very gifted communication skills on your podcast in one way, and then also just in communicating with the public in everything you do. So your parents sound extraordinary to me.
They're amazing. I mean, my sister came and said, I'm going to start a fashion. And in the Arabic world...
Tell me, what is this big company that your sister has?
My sister was always an entrepreneur. We were little in Boston, and in the fall, the leaves would fall, and she'd say, listen, she's 5 years older. She'd say, I want you to go to the neighbor's house, and I want you to offer to rake the leaves. And I was like 9 or 10. And she said, and you tell them to pay you in 2 dimes and a nickel. And I was like, okay. She goes, I want you, I talked to them the other day, I want you to go to house number 26. Okay. I'd say, I'm here to rake the leaves. I'd say, okay, go ahead. And they'd give me 2 dimes and a nickel. And then she'd say, give me 1 of the dimes. Go enjoy that. And I said, my God. She was like, she's always been an entrepreneur. But my parents fostered that. They said, be realistic, but work hard. My dad was the inventor of a heat transfer label that changed the face of Rolling Rock beer, and Heineken beer, and a few others. So we're sort of an entrepreneurial family that thinks really big and doesn't mind working hard. But my sister decided to start a fashion magazine. And at first my parents were like, okay, what are you talking about? And in our culture, you're raised to say, are you going to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, an engineer, or an accountant? Those are your options.
That was it.
That's it. And anything else, they don't understand. But she said, no, I want to start a fashion magazine. They said, okay, work hard. And she said, I'm gonna do it just regionally in Boston. It was called Platinum Magazine. It was going to be clean. It's not like how to lose 10 pounds in 10 days, 10 signs your boyfriend's cheating on you, none of that. It was kind of like a Vanity Fair with a really high fashion content. And we just worked really hard. And then somebody picked it up in LA and said, this is really good content and really solid fashion. And they said, we want to roll it out nationally. And then it ended up being rolled out internationally. And thrived. My sister was in New York during 9/11 for the magazine. And we ended up closing it about a year after because that industry got completely wiped. For those following the magazine industry, it got completely wiped. But I learned a lot of valuable lessons. I mean, we would go to meetings in some of the biggest, fashion houses or ad agencies, and you'd look at sort of the roster of who was there before you, and it's like Harpo, like dying, and you'd sit with these people and they'd ask you these questions, and it really refined sort of the marketing skills. And I realized you can have the best product in the world. You can be talking about the best nonprofit in the world. But if people have no idea what you do and don't feel connected to it, then it's losing its value. So when we took over Crime Stoppers, that was a really big thing for me. I wanted to connect it. I wanted to make sure people knew what we did, and not just knew what we did, but felt like, this is my nonprofit. This applies to me right now. So, and it's weird. Everything in my mind goes back to Crime Stoppers.
No, I'm so glad you brought it full circle, because that's the connectivity piece is what's so important. So what are the beyond the school safety, which we kind of delved into? What are the other programs and initiatives that you are involved in with Crime Stoppers that is not getting enough play, that you really want to drive home with the public?
There are many. So we are forever changing. We are ever responding to the needs and the pulse of the community. But human trafficking is a big one right now, and we're doing a lot in that space in terms of education and awareness. Our Safe Community program is about to be invested in heavily from our side in terms of reaching the community. You'll be meeting with Mayor Turner later today to talk about illegal dumping and Constable Alan Rosen. There are so many issues from animal cruelty and on that we want the community to plug into in a more direct way as sort of ambassadors. These are issues people care about, but sometimes don't know what to do about them. So if we can talk about, what your city council person is asking you to do, or what your response to them should be, or what are meaningful answers, what are meaningful resources, how can you contribute today, how can you make a difference today. That's huge. The other thing is victim services. Houston is such an incredible city, but we have unique crime problems that are sort of a stain on our city. Human trafficking being one, commercial robberies being another, property crimes. There are a lot of different things that are unique to Houston that are kind of hard. Right now we're taking a deep dive. We're looking at sort of the re-victimization. People are, that gets a little political, and we don't want to be political, but when people commit a very serious crime in Houston, a felony crime, are they being let out on bond? Is it the right thing to do? Is the bond too low? We're looking at cases at Crime Stoppers where somebody was wanted for human trafficking. They were caught. The judge said, go out on your bond and be good, and they committed murder. Now we look for them again, and okay, we found them. Now it's aggravated assault, and there's many issues there. But what about the victim? Yeah. The victims in all this, the victims rely on our infrastructure, on our law enforcement that's arresting. They're going out there and making the arrests, on the judicial system to really follow the law, on people to, if it's a serious felony crime where it is what it is, they shouldn't be out on deferred adjudication. And again, I'm talking about serious, where you have a history of trafficking young girls. I just feel strongly that we have an obligation to protect these victims. We had one woman that said, a man was stalking her, and she called law enforcement. He broke in, he was arrested, he was let out, he came back and raped her. And she said, what am I supposed to do? I trusted the system. So we don't want to get political, and we hate the nexus of politics in these conversations. But at the end of the day, there are people in this city, this community, that are here for whatever reasons. They feel vulnerable for whatever reasons. Life has made them this way, whatever it is. We have an obligation to make sure that violent criminals, I'm not talking about the young kid that smoked pot, I'm talking about violent, capital murder, rape, human trafficking, that these people are taken care of by society. And I'm not saying we don't invest heavily in education on the criminal side. What are they doing when they serve time? We need to be investing in them there, but we've got to be separating them from community too. And I know a lot of people disagree with that, but we're really starting to look at that to see how do we protect the victims there.
And I get it. I understand trying to walk that line and where it intersects with politics, because it has to, because it requires legislation in order to make some of these things happen. And I understand that. And when I launched the podcast, and I have this written in the show notes on the website, I put very clearly, this show is not about politics.
Yeah.
It is about trying to help us understand and remember our common humanity within the context of what is happening politically and every other aspect of society. But it's always a delicate dance, but it is one that we need to do.
We have to.
Yeah.
Just these are important issues, and we had another issue that we've identified the last couple of years actually, which is the safety of kids at camp. A mom called and said, my son was raped at a very prominent Texas camp, and I have no recourse. There's nothing I can do to get help. And we said, that can't be right. Well, there can't be right. And so we started to dive into it and realize that there's almost no oversight of camps in Texas, and not just Texas, but across the country. And we started researching even more, found over 1,000 cases of kids being sexually assaulted at camp. Nothing happens. So, Crime Stoppers is so unique in that, one, we like the research. We want to hold the victim's hand. We want to be a resource. Law enforcement does its job in making the arrests. That's what they're there to do. We can be there to hold your hand, to petition for change, to study crime trends and educate the community, to take it not a step further, but in a different direction.
Right.
And so we take pride in that. We love that work.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of anyone better qualified, not just in terms of background and everything, but also with heart and passion than you to lead this organization. So I look forward to seeing really more of how you accomplish the goals that you've set for the organization. And I really, really hope that the school safety program that you've established and what you're doing to train other Crime Stoppers around the state, and hopefully that will become a nationwide program, because it's so easy.
It's so
It's
easy.
so easy. It's not
From
rocket
your
science.
mouth. I mean,
It's so easy.
It's
Why is
so-
this not being done everywhere?
I think we just didn't have the voice. But when
Okay.
the governor did it, people like you say it, it moves the needle big time for us.
We gotta get it out there. We got Rania. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for taking the
so
time
much.
to share.
What an honor to sit with
so
you.
much with our audience today, and
Thank
giving us a
you.
lot to think about and a lot to be proud of, and knowing also there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, we appreciate
We
it.
can do it
Thank you.
together. Right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Rania. And thank all of you for watching and listening and giving her permission to speak, and for having the courage to listen with an open mind. We'll see you next time. I'm a firm believer that if we can find a way to better understand each other's experiences, we can find a way to accept and respect each other for who we are, even when we don't agree. That's the ultimate goal of this podcast. So with that in mind, what do you want the world to know about your story? How might your story, your truth, provide an important perspective to help bridge our divides? If you'd like to share your story with us for a chance to be featured on the podcast, all you have to do is go to our website, ourvoicesmatterpodcast.com, and click on What's Your Story? We can't wait to hear from you, because your voice matters.